Hey everybody, welcome to the Otherz Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Penny. Joining me this week, some special guests, long awaited, 2 returning guests, 1 brand new, and with new music for us that I've been ranting and raving about for the last month or 2. It is all the gentlemen from Spymob. Welcome, guys.
And Steve.
Thanks, Steven. Thanks, Steve.
For having us.
So, Brent and Eric, obviously you are returning members. So, in the nicest possible way, we're going to ignore you initially, and we're going to have a nice chat to John and go through the formalities of some of John's history and some of the work with Spymob in the earlier days. And then we're going to get on to the more recent stuff, and we're going to talk about the new music you guys have just put out. So, John, all right then. I think I've asked this to the other guy, so I'll ask you kind of the similar sort of questions that I have with them. Try and keep it a little bit quicker than the other rambling chats we've had. But can you just give us a bit about, your sort of background, early days, kind of how you first got into music and your sort of influences back then?
Sure. I grew up in Northern Virginia and then in the San Francisco Bay Area. And let's see, my grandmother was my piano teacher. I just kind of grew up with listening to a lot of music. My favorite band from a very young age and still is the Beatles. I grew up with a lot of kind of classic rock. I also, I took a lot of piano lessons and studied a lot of music. So I studied jazz, took jazz piano lessons and played that as a teenager. So I feel like studying and playing jazz also was a big influence, even though my primary thing was playing in rock bands. Yeah, grew up, my high school years were in Palo Alto, California, and there were a ton of great musicians around me my age, people who were really good and people who were writing like professional quality songs. And just having that kind of talent around me was a really positive influence on my musical development.
And how about kind of the singing songwriting part of it? If you're sort of learning the piano and that side, did that kind of come alongside it, or is it something you kind of picked up at a later stage?
I think it was kind of in my early teen years that I started writing songs a little bit. My first experience was I had a first cousin who would make up songs on the piano. And when we would spend time at my grandmother's, because my grandmother was a music teacher, she had 2 pianos. So we would make up duets together. That was my first experience of making up songs. But in my teen years, I was mostly focused on kind of learning other people's songs. I think just kind of trying to develop as a musician. I was more focused on that than songwriting. But then I guess kind of, later in high school and in college is when I got more into songwriting, and I'd always sung. I just kind of always did, even when I was a little kid. So, yeah.
And I was going to ask this later on, actually, but I'll ask it now because we're sort of in that area. A lot of the sort of stuff you've kind of done with sort of Spymob is a lot of kind of like spoken word type stuff, almost like poetry. When I listen to it, is how I sort of hear it. Is that another sort of influence from back then? Because it's quite a sort of unique style of writing, I would say.
Lyric writing has always been the harder part of songwriting for me, always. And even for my first years of writing songs, I found it so frustrating that I actually thought that I actually need to connect with a lyricist, because this is so hard for me. But I didn't really plan. I kind of like in the Spymob days back when we were playing before, I just kind of wrote lyrics on an automatic pilot and was just kind of trying to come up with decent lyrics for songs. So it wasn't all that intentional, but I definitely was, studying and listening to other lyricists who I liked. So definitely influenced by a lot of different people, but I don't feel like I was very intentional with how I was writing lyrics.
When you're sort of writing stuff like that, are you bouncing stuff off of these guys as well? Or do you kind of keep it to yourself when you're writing those lyrics? Is it a sort of more personal thing?
Kind of keeping that to myself, but then I would be presenting songs to these guys. And then something that I think was very healthy about our band from the start is, even though I was the primary songwriter, these guys would be then working with these songs. And so what you ended up hearing came from very much all of us. But I had many songs rejected too, or songs that people just weren't feeling. So it's not like if I brought in a song, we would automatically do it. And all along, even though sometimes it frustrated me, that always felt really good to me. Like, man, this band is all about we're gonna have high standards. And if they're not feeling a song, even if I think it's amazing, it ain't gonna happen. Which it's still that way.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's a good thing to have, definitely.
Yeah.
And for you, when you're kind of piecing songs together, is it always the kind of melody and the music that comes first, or are there songs where you've got the lyrics down first because you've had an idea of something?
It's a little bit kind of like this, but
Okay.
definitely music first. I don't know if I've ever written lyrics that I then set to a song, but it's kind of simultaneous.
Okay. Works hand in hand.
Yeah.
Can I just speak to a bit of what John shared?
Mm.
So John and I were, by chance, college roommates our first year. And I remember learning that my roommate, I got a letter in the mail. My roommate's John Ostby. We got into contact and we both learned that we both had played in bands, and maybe someone in the admissions office put us together for that reason. But we exchanged music, and John shared these songs that he had been writing with his band in high school. And these were really solid songs and just great playing. And I had been in a band in junior high and high school, and we wrote songs, but it was not a common thing in our town. And this culture of music that you grew up in, John, in Palo Alto, was just really sophisticated. I mean, by comparison, and just really incredible. So I just wanted to speak to that. And the bands that John exposed me to that he grew up with in high school, I remember listening to in college. These were just really great. I mean, these weren't your average high school rock bands. They were really sophisticated. And then in terms of John's lyrics, I mean, John, you've always been a reader. I mean, I remember your Charles Bukowski phase, and whether it was poetry or novels, and or your Hemingway phase. And I remember feeling Hemingway, sort of wave through your lyrics. And so there's always been, literary influences, I feel.
That is true. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm as into words as music in terms of just as a just as somebody who's listening to music and reading books and stuff, as a fan of other people's stuff.
Yeah.
When you listen to music now, what do you pick out of? It's not your own music. You're just listening to something for your own pleasure. Are you listening to the music first, or do you pay attention to the lyrics first, if either?
So definitely the music, but I definitely pay attention to lyrics, but in a way of almost like the musicality of it, of like how the singer is. But I'm amazed by people who will like love a song that came out on the radio and then they know the lyrics. Like they just kind of I have to sit down and memorize lyrics. And I actually don't, like, I can love a song, but I won't really know what the lyrics are until I sit down and maybe read them. I don't pick up on lyrics like some people do.
Not that I've said this, but not that I'm musical in any way. I'm certainly not. But same thing, growing up in a sort of 90s, getting really into music then, listening to lots of like hip hop and rap. A lot of that I couldn't really sort of decipher. My memory's terrible anyway, but it wouldn't sit there. So it was just at the start of the internet. So it was when you're Googling the lyrics for the latest song that's come out and then having to sort of sit there and read along to it. And now in my head, there's, hundreds, thousands of random lyrics from random songs. And I can't remember what I had for dinner yesterday, but if a song from 30 something years ago comes on, I can just, recite it.
Yeah. I've, for whatever reason, I have not naturally had a brain like that for lyrics, but it may be because I have to be kind of so intentional about it. Maybe that somehow, I don't know, helps me in some way.
And Eric, you mentioned, when you kind of linked up with John, he'd almost sort of come from a completely different place, and the musicality and his experience is very different. So when you guys started getting together, are you guys kind of actively learning from him now that you sort of look back on it, and taking some of his experiences from his childhood and growing up, and in terms of what he was listening to and how he approaches music?
Is the question, did we learn from John?
Basically, yes.
I mean, with every song. Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
I think, I think that the thing that has felt for me so incredibly rich about this collaboration is just the learning that we've always been a band where we feel free to play each other's instruments. And so we've always, John talks about bringing in songs that don't get accepted or worked on. Well, we all bring parts that don't get accepted or worked on. And it's always been a democracy. I know that in Genesis, the band Genesis, like Tony Banks did all the keyboards. And there was a time when Phil Collins came in and played a little piano part at the end, and Tony's like, "You can't do that." And that's just never been us. We've always felt free to, you're like, well, what if you did that, or what if we did that, or what if you lay out there? And that has just led to, I mean, the reason why we're still, well, I'm still doing this, but I think the reason why we all are is that we all just, it's a big playground where we get to try on our own ideas, and then we have bandmates who feel free to give us feedback in a, collaboratively healthy way. And it's so rich. So absolutely. I mean, with every, John is always the thing. Brent and I talk about this, and we talk about it as a band, but John's writing just goes where it goes, which is, for our record labels probably was sort of head scratching. Like, what do we do with this? But for Pharrell, it was a very welcome thing to have a writer who just goes where he goes. And Brent and I have always just felt a kind of delight in, okay, well, what do we do with this? We just follow our interest, and John's never failed to create interest in Brent and I in working on things, but it has meant that we have to then grow in that direction, which has always been a challenge, but also been super exciting.
And the learning has gone both ways. I mean, Eric and Brent are much more focused on arranging than I am. They're much more focused on production and engineering and things that I'm just not natural at. So yeah, the influence and the learning definitely goes all around.
Yeah. And if we jump forward a little bit to the In Search of time, John, I'd like to get your sort of take on, how it sort of came about. Like, were you aware of the Neptunes first of all? And then what your kind of initial thoughts were when this was kind of presented to the group?
Well, I didn't know who the Neptunes were when we were contacted by Pharrell. I learned who they were, and came to really like what they did and really enjoyed and learned a lot from them. So yeah, I mean, that was a great experience. The In Search of recording, Brent and Eric and Christian were much more of a force on that album than I was, because, Chad Hugo is a great keyboard player in his own right. And they didn't need as much from me, really. They needed live drums and guitar and electric bass. But so my contributions on that album were much more modest than these guys. But it was very fun. It was a great experience. I probably contributed more when we were turning that into a live thing.
Okay.
I will say though that on a song like "Am I High," you
I
are
was
quite
just going to
prominent.
say,
I mean, that piano performance and your vocals are,
yeah.
quite forward on that one.
Still an important part.
But I mean, just factually, I think, just Chad Hugo's keyboard playing on that is amazing.
Absolutely.
They
I
didn't
just wanted to-
need they didn't need a whole other layer of keyboards.
And if you weren't quite as sort of as involved as the other guys, were you still providing feedback to the other guys on the kind of project as a whole as you're kind of all working
Not
through
really.
it? No.
Not really. I was like hanging out, reading books mostly.
We've got a
No.
lot of video evidence of John providing comic relief.
Yeah. I mean, Chad was really running things, and he had the vision for what he wanted. Chad was running that more than Pharrell was in terms of our contribution, and it wasn't needed. I think this gets into a whole other topic, but one of, back, maybe it's different now, I don't know, but back when we were doing this full time, music was as macho as like a football team or serving in the Marine Corps. I mean, just very male, very like big egos, and something that was great about playing with this band and with working with Pharrell and Chad was it was not like that. If somebody didn't have anything to contribute, they didn't say anything. Or if you're like, no, I'm not feeling your part. It's like, all right, cool. It wasn't this big navigating around egos, which can be a big, big thing that you got to navigate around with male musicians. I'm kind of I'm not as in the scene now. Maybe it's better. But back then, it was just sort of an annoying part of having to make music that was very refreshing about this group of people not having to do that. And they were like that too. Even though they were big star producers, they were not.
Well, that's good to hear. And I'm sure there still are plenty of egos out there in the music industry. And I hear from different people I know that work with sort of, in different areas. And I think that's still one of the challenges a lot of them face, the politics, which you get everywhere really, to a certain extent in every, workplace or walk of life.
Yeah.
So after kind of In Search of You, you sort of moved away from music. Was it around sort of 2006, I think, or something I read?
4 and 5.
Okay.
2004 and 5. Yeah. I made some music. I played for a few years, played in a few bands, but nothing serious on the level of seriousness of this and what we've started doing back in 2024 when we started recording again. But no, I really moved away from music. Had a few kids. I ended up going back to school, became a therapist, and really got into that, which I'm still into. I'm somebody who, if I'm not really connected with other musicians who I'm really inspired by, I'm not somebody who's just going to go off and like compose music, record it on my own. It just doesn't really happen for me.
That was going to be my next sort of question. Did you not sort of fancy not being quite as much in the forefront, but maybe, sort of sitting back and writing songs for other artists or something along those lines? But it sounds like, you just, if you're not with the group, with the band day to day, you're not really into it.
Yeah, that's just not really, I make music or where I am musical is when I am in regular contact collaborating with other musicians. That's where I come alive. Otherwise, it just doesn't really hold my interest.
That's fair enough. And you mentioned you've been working as a therapist for the last number of years. Eric, that's also your sort of domain as well, isn't it, these days?
Yeah.
Is that just sheer coincidence, or did, the traumas of the music industry both drive you to wanting to be therapists?
Well, my answer to that is that from the time John and I were roommates in college, and then certainly through our experience in Spymob with Brent and Twig and our other bass players, like the theme of psychology and relationship just comes up and comes up and comes up. And I grew up in a colorful family. I'll say that, led me to have to think about psychology from an early age. And it was always a dream job. Like it was always sort of this other dream job for me off in the future. And I know that, in therapy has really helped me personally. So after Spymob, I continued to do a lot of session work and production work and continued to, work on and off with Pharrell through Seeing Sounds, and then had a music licensing company for many years. But that was just a brutal path. And what always drew me, I learned, after being a session player and doing a lot of session work, is that playing the drums is not what makes me most happy. What makes me most happy is collaboration. And as music licensing became less and less collaborative and more just administrative, and I was just feeling this sort of hole in my heart, that other dream job of becoming a therapist became more and more front and center. And John had, like 9 or 10 years before I went for it, John had become a therapist, and he was really supportive of that. But it was a pretty organic development within me. And I would say John and I are very different therapists because we need all the therapists. Like we need all the approaches. And I think John and I come at the work from different approaches. But I would say that our relationship work in Spymob was absolutely a part of, we had to do a lot of work internally to keep things moving ahead. And that means a lot of introspection. And I think we've all had to do a lot of internal work, which is so inspiring. And I just want that for everyone. And I do a lot of work with creative types who are in collaborative organizations. And this experience with these guys has been just so inspiring because I want this kind of longevity, for all my clients.
I guess, Brent, it's worked out well for you because, if you ever need some therapy, you've got
Yeah,
two
I
on
got
call basically.
2 on-call guys. I don't even have to give them my insurance number, Yeah, no, it's great. And I think to what both John and Eric were saying is that I think a big part, I've always thought this, a big part of Spymob's success was our ability to work things out together with, to take responsibility, to be open to somebody coming with something and hearing another person, like when Eric says that all the stuff that happened in Spymob, it's so true because even I feel it years later after we took a break there, 2004 or whatever it was. Like I always thought back to how special that time was because I'd be here working with other musicians and things like that. And I would see the struggles, and I could see how Spymob avoided some of those struggles by being like having a very open communication and taking each of us taking responsibilities for our BS that we'll bring in and hearing each other out, So yeah, that I really feel like that was a very big part of Spymob. I mean, shoot, our first run, you guys, was what, since 93 to '04, Like
Yeah.
it's a long run for a band, and it
Yeah.
takes a
I mean,
lot,
and we were doing something most days of the week. I mean, we were a hard working, grinding band. Like we were
Yeah.
in the trenches together for years and years.
And also some of that early stuff, because you're doing that when you're younger, you're figuring yourself out, in your teens but that influenced all what we're doing now for me. And I know I'm sure it did for John and Eric, but there's even more of a space in Spymob right now of openness and we're really like Eric was saying, we get, John gives us these songs and we go in on them and we're all together and we're very, very open to if another person is really feeling strongly about something, we go back in there. Whether we spent, I mean, shoot, a couple months ago, Eric, and John was like, I don't know if I like that direction. And it was like literally I had to wipe the whole thing and, go at it. But it's like, it's not a big deal. It's just part of what we do. And I agree with Eric, what he said is like, I find more satisfaction of creating with somebody and building something together, so it just kind of I feel like we're all in that same spot.
So have you missed it over the years then, not working as directly with these guys as they've been off kind of with their different lives?
Absolutely. 100%. I can remember a conversation with Eric and I remember where I was, Bank of America parking lot and talking to Eric about somebody who was in Minneapolis, a popular saxophone player, I think it was, who posted on Facebook that they're going to stop their professional music career and move into something. And I remember Eric saying, and this was crushing. Eric said to me, he's like, yeah, Brent, I don't know. I just haven't been feeling, that direction in my life. And I remember thinking, oh my God, what if I never can play with Eric again? I was crushed, and thinking what if I could never have this back, So in the back of my mind, I did always want, because I feel so a part of Spymob. And I've done a lot of work. I feel very a part of work with Pharrell too. And I feel very passionate about that work. But just to have this band and these people that I care and love and trust so much to make music with, I definitely missed that.
I'm pretty sure when we had that conversation, Brent, that I wasn't considering the possibility of collaborating with you guys again. Because I think at that time, for me, it was, as John said, I'm not just driven to play drums. I need a relational context. I need songs that feel like this is a group mission. But if someone had given me a little glimpse into what became an opportunity for us to do this again, I would have given you a different answer.
Well, and that's why I got strategic and thought maybe if I write the right words in this text and say, we can do it. We can use Logic and Dropbox, and John, just give us one song. We'll just try it out. And now look what happened.
Yeah. It's a gateway song.
Yeah. I was a little drug dealer. I had to drop a little.
Right.
That segues us nicely into, the new stuff and us being here. So the new album is out to purchase at the moment, if I'm right, and it'll be available to stream after the summer. And then we've got a number September, okay, or 1st of September for the rest of the world. And throughout, between now and then, you're going to drop a number of singles. I think there's one each month, isn't there?
Actually, now 5. We're going to do 5 before September. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And you mentioned there, you sort of coaxing the guys back into this where we are now. But how did it actually come about? Was it literally just a text saying, should we do something?
Yeah, it was a group text, and just threw out the idea. Maybe we could try a song, and it was a kind of let's try it for fun, But yeah, I mean, I'm sure, I had some other intentions because I would always wanted Spymob back. But yeah, it started with that. And, those John and Eric can fill in the rest,
Well, we had always stayed friends. There was never a time when we, lost our friendship. We didn't stop making music because we didn't like each other. We stopped making music because we couldn't afford to keep doing it at that time. So we'd always had a text thread, and one, in either early January 2024, someone acknowledged that it's coming up on the 20th anniversary of the release of Sitting Around Keeping Score. Maybe we do a song, maybe we do a remake, or maybe we do something. And we were on this text thread, and there was some expressed interest, and we kept chatting. And then John left the chat to go to sleep, and the rest of us kept chatting excitedly, and talking more technically about how to do it long distance, because Brent's in Los Angeles and John and I are here. And John woke up to this really long text thread, and then John, I'll let you describe what you felt.
I was not initially very interested. It almost felt like ancient history to try to make music together again. And I was not writing songs. I had actually sold my piano a couple months before, but simultaneously I had a lot of gratitude that I was still friends with these guys. And but then I was kind of like, oh shit, I guess we're doing this. But it was more but my excitement about it more was kind of like just connecting with my old friends, because it was kind of like, oh shit, I gotta go to Guitar Center and buy a keyboard and try to write some songs. And I didn't know how successful I would be at that, jumping back into it. But once I wrote a song or two, it was like the fire was lit for me too.
And the
It almost
songs
sounds
will
like
keep coming.
it sounds like the music's kind of almost secondary in this whole project. It sounds like the most important thing to you guys is just the ability to just be best mates again and do something collaborative again. And if you've got some great music out of it, it's an added bonus almost.
Say for me, the added bonus is, I would love fan support, and we want people to like it. I really, really, really want that. That feels extra special. To me, it is the friendship, which can exist on its own, and John's songs, and then the collaboration of what we do in that sandbox. That's enough for me to keep doing it. And then of course we want, we hope people like it, but we're doing it because we love the music. I wouldn't say the music is secondary. I would say the music is part of this amalgamation that makes it work. And then a bonus is if people like it.
And I think there's a fluidity with Spymob. But what's really interesting, even as we were finishing these songs, even the first ones, I'd listen back to them, and I'd be like, wow, these are Spymob songs. We've worked together so much that we've just we fall into this sound, and there's an ease to it. And there's an ease to it it's not ever really easy, but like, you know what I mean? But they're in the creative world, there's a flow and an ease to us making songs together right now. And that's what I think sucks us in, because we're doing that, but we have these, then we come out with this great product. It's not like, we have these great songs and this great relationship. So it's a whole big stew that keeps us together, yeah, it feels great. It's something that we're very familiar with. It flows nice and we get great product out of it. Sounds like a marketing thing.
The end result, I
End
felt like,
result.
You're like, we're really
we're,
happy with the content.
Yeah, yeah.
we're content developers.
Man.
And how was it actually, having to create stuff in sort of slightly different situation now than you were previously, with, Brent being so far away? Did you have to kind of work on that process? Did you find that sort of more difficult? And I guess in John and Eric, did you get to do anything in person as well?
Yeah. Can I take a crack at that, you guys?
Yes.
So I was the most confused by that at first. These guys had worked a little bit more, had more of a sense of how we would do it. But I can remember calling Eric to be like, I don't understand how this is going to work, because we always worked things out in a room. But he kind of explained to me, he was just like, no, you're going to track keyboard to a click and sing, and we'll build off of that. And I was just like, weird. Okay. And then, but it almost became like a production, a little bit of like establishing like a production line, almost like how they would do it at Motown. First, you give it to the writers, and then Eric. So Eric would take that, and he'd kind of take the first crack at an arrangement, and then Brent would come on board. And most of my contribution was at the beginning, other than big picture stuff, but it was figuring out a whole different way to do it that was completely different than anything.
Yeah, and John would come to my space physically and play on a MIDI keyboard, and generally there'd be an idea of like, what is this sound going to be? Is it going to be a piano? Is it going to be electric piano? Is it going to be something else? But Brent and I feel free to take John's original delivery and then turn it upside down, turn it around, add colors, and just see what happens. It's just like playground. But
Yeah.
we learned that so much of, in the beginning, I treated John's initial sing as kind of a scratch vocal. So I would just have him do one or two. But in a number of cases on this album, that first performance was like forever in time. He did one vocal performance, and that's the one we used. On It's Not the Only Way, there was one vocal performance. We just used the first one. So after a while, we realized that it's that first day of singing that can be the all important, like, initial presentation. So I would have him do, instead of one or two takes these days, because we're pretty deep into the second album, I'll have him do 6 or 7 passes right from the top.
Yeah.
Hey, Rafa.
bro. How you doing, bud?
Yeah, I'm doing very good, especially now. Thanks.
Good to see you, man. Is it vintage? Is it vintage?
It
The
is.
trucker?
It is. Yeah, you have like sweat marks and everything.
Yeah. Awesome.
Pleasure to talk to you guys.
Yeah, you too, man.
Fuck you.
Welcome to fatherhood.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, congratulations, man.
Oh, thank you, guys.
John, you mentioned, it took you a couple of sort of songs to get back into it when you were sort of writing stuff. But how long did it take to do those couple of songs? Were they kind of quite hard to kind of get into and get working with? Or was it like, riding a bike? You were sort of straight back on there, basically.
It was like riding a bike, and I was I mean, I was coming in very rusty on playing, on singing, on lyrics, but I don't know. Yeah, it just came right back.
It
And
sure
there's
did.
has your writing process changed over the years or anything? Were you doing anything differently this time?
What's different now is back in the day, I didn't edit lyrics a lot. A lot of lyrics were pretty raw. Like, they were kind of like first or second draft. I edit a lot more now. Like, I feel like I understand how to edit more. And also back in the day, I rarely would just be sitting working on lyrics unless I was also sitting at a piano or with a guitar. But these days, I can really run music through my head more once it's established. So like most of the time I spend on my part of just writing a song is actually like on my laptop working on and editing, tweaking lyrics. So that's changed a lot for me.
And John, do you think being a therapist like helped you to jump in on the lyric side, like writing more?
In some ways, yes, because I wasn't being that creative musically for years, but I really had channeled a lot of creativity into that work. And there is a lot of just kind of improvisation, responding to the moment in that work. So it probably just kind of kept my creative brain going, I'm guessing. So indirectly, yeah.
And then I was going to mention, Eric, I think Brent sort of mentioned to me when we were chatting a little while back, this time you didn't have the live drums. I think a lot of the stuff was programmed. So again, was that a new sort of process for, it's always in there.
Yeah.
Was that a sort of different process for yourself to kind of adapt to as well?
Yes. I can still throw.
You never lose it.
So originally, when we first started talking about it, there was the assumption that there would be recording. And I do, from time to time, I still do record drums. And I have a friend who lives close by with just a fantastic garage studio where I can record drums. But John was not just writing a couple songs, like the third and fourth and fifth and sixth and seventh and 10th and 15th song came pretty quickly. And so we saw what the opportunity was. And so we had to ask the question, like, what is the priority here? Is the priority to you go fully old school and record drums? What does that mean? And what would be lost if we didn't? Because over the course of the last 20 years, especially in the production work I was doing in the world of music licensing, where we were creating custom compositions for advertising and marketing, and I got really facile with programming drums and knowing how to program in a way that still reflects my musical intention. So then we had to ask, okay, what are the tools that we have at hand? And it just so happened that Logic has some built-in drum programming tools that have sounds that are quite close to what I would be going for in my own drumming production anyway. So we thought, okay, let's try it. Let's just do some testing. Let's see what we can do. Actually, the first couple of songs, I found some samples of my drums, of me drumming. Like Another Night is largely me drumming, but it's an old recording that I adapted. It's Not the Only Way also has a drum performance that I did for another purpose many years ago. Everything else is programmed. And at the end of the day, once I'm doing a drum performance and I'm editing it and cleaning it up, we're pretty close to programmed drums anyway. So I'm programming feel into it. These aren't fully quantized drum performances, but we did some testing and it's like, this sounds good enough because taking the time to record drums plus the expense of it just would be such a weight on the production process. It's still me programming the drums. I'm not programming anything that I wouldn't have played. I'm not programming anything that I can't play, because always in my mind is like, okay, what is it that I want my body to have done? And as a band, we're like, yeah, this works. So we've stuck to it. I'm open to drumming physically, but the cost was just too high and the benefit was too great to not do it this way. So, my drums are sad, but they're in therapy. It's going to be okay.
That was something that was brought up. That was one of my thoughts at first, was how do we technically do this now? Because we're used to just being a band, being in a room. We love playing together. We love recording our own instruments, but it's just not feasible. With the guys being there. And John, once he got the piano and started writing again, was writing a lot of songs.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
Eric said, they were coming in. And we were really, on our end, we're excited about it. So John's going over to Eric's and recording 4 or 5 at a time and digging into them for 3, 4 days, 5 days and sending them to me. And there's just no way we could have done that. Like Eric and I had that conversation, like, how would we do this? Eric could have went to his friends, I think it's Adam down the street, and we could have recorded those. But then what if we change the tempo? What if we change the arrangement? We can do that. And nowadays you're afforded a much more flexibility with that, but not like programmed instruments. It was about the arrangement. It really was about arrangement and the ability to do it. Like, so Logic really afforded us the ability to make as many songs as we've been making, and new technology has afforded that. Yes, if I was in Minneapolis, and I'm sure we would have recorded more real drums. It's not feasible when I'm not there, and the budgets and arranging. There's just so many things that make that really complex in the Spymob world, especially.
But it sounds like the trade-off was worth it. Like Eric says, the sounds that you got out of doing the programming were near enough exactly what you would produce as a drummer yourself anyway. So you kind of, it's effectively like almost doing it.
Yeah. And they feel like, like Eric said, he's not just dropping things on there. They feel right, good, it feels great. So it's great. And it's afforded us to do this now, which is great,
Yeah. In this world of like increased and accelerating technology, there's this very important, valid question of like, at what point is creativity sacrificed? And I'm always asking myself, does this feel valid? And every note of that drum performance is a choice and is placed. Like the software isn't making the creative choices. The software is providing the palette. Because I do think we don't want to get to a place where we're allowing the computers to make the choices and then we decide that's good enough. I think there is a danger of just letting the humanity get sucked out. But the way that we're doing it feels a lot like what we're already doing in the studio with microphone choices and preamp choices and compressor choices and EQ choices. It just looks different.
And just on that, like Brent, are you seeing anything when you're working with other artists at the moment that are still recording? Are you seeing them starting to utilize the kind of AI type stuff a little bit more? Is there more of an uptick of that? Even if it's just for sort of demos and rough cuts.
Yeah, I guess, I'm not working with a ton of different people right now. I do see it. Yeah, I do see more people using, if more people who are like more beat guys, or maybe, like don't play as much instruments, especially using some. And there are some like, I have some friends who are really talented at that, just to have great ears, might not understand the theory and things like that. So, but they're using it well. But not in my world, I don't see a ton of it. I only see it utilized in kind of the way that we're utilizing it, where it's like, Spymob is really like, we're pretty hardcore about like, it's got to feel creatively true to us. We do, you know what I mean? We're still able to do this with programmed drums and make it past our mark, which is for Spymob's a tough mark. We're pretty particular about that kind of stuff. I'll recut guitars. It'll take me 3 days sometimes, just because John or Eric might say, hey, maybe we could. And okay, I'm back in, like, so
well,
it doesn't.
We've reprogrammed drums a number of times when
God.
when the arrangement goes a different direction and the original drum approach no longer fits, which is a really great option in the way that we do it.
Yeah, I mean, you would take like a band like Spymob, right? Like Forever in Time, I think it got reprogrammed completely, right, Eric? I think
Yeah.
I mean, Eric, thank you. Eric did win in, but we had a whole version. I mean, there's a whole version that's almost complete of that song. And then we decided, well, it's not working. We had to redo it. But had we went in the studio and recorded drums, and spent that money, that's all just down the drain, and it would have been more time, So this is just right now. It's been the perfect fit for us to really get back in and be creative and make the music we want to make.
there's an art to programming. You know, you can't program a great drum track unless you're musical. If it doesn't sound musical, it hasn't been programmed.
Yeah, definitely. And Eric, you talked about sort of the ability to sort of change stuff quite quickly when it's sort of programmed. Is that one of the kind of big pros over actually doing the live drums and having to go and kind of go back in a room and pay for that room and that time and redo everything?
Yeah. I mean, it would be so great if we were given a massive budget and studio time, and I love drumming, and that would be great. But yeah, that flexibility, making a recording is all about choices. And when you have more options for changing colors and changing intensities after the fact, it's so helpful, because John talked about his lyric writing and music writing being like this. It's the same with an arrangement. Like you're going to push over here, well, you might need to tug over there. And it's all about, it's like making a stew. You got to get all the balances right. And so it's just so satisfying from a creative standpoint to be able to shift things around as the song tells you more about what it wants to be.
Yeah. And I noticed, I think it was in the credits, it mentions a couple of the tracks were sort of reworks of other tracks that you had from earlier times, I think. Was that just a couple that you kind of pulled from the archives?
All the Possibilities of Love was the one that comes to mind. And Steve, I don't know where you read that, because I don't remember us putting it anywhere, but All the Possibilities of Love is a song that John wrote when he was like 24 years old. And it's always blown my mind as like a sophisticated, just musical composition and a quite sophisticated lyrical message. And it was just sort of like, there are a few of these songs that never got the treatment that we felt, or at least one of us would have felt that it deserved. And it just felt like it wanted to be done. So
in of the original, like, what survived?
Some guitar parts survived.
Yeah. I remember when we started working on it, I was like, oh man, I want to keep that same guitar part I had before.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have a recording. Alex recorded it. Do we have a recording of it? Okay.
Yeah. And the drums are just too heavy, and
there's some, like, I have a few where I go back and I'm like, God damn it, why did I do it that way? Like, kind of. And I love the song called Sunbelt, where I'm like, oh, we have a recording of it.
It's
I'm
another
like,
one. It's a great
it's another
song.
great. I know, but it's like, Brent,
You were living in the 90s.
I was so in the 90s, like big guitar. But yeah, so it's fun to, it was really fun to revisit, though. Don't like to revisit all the possibilities of love from us now, a little more growing up. It was great to revisit it and redo it and feel amazed, just so satisfied with the result.
And
it wasn't chosen because we had a lack of songs. It was chosen because it was intentionally chosen.
I was going to say, it sort of stood the test of time, obviously. It was waiting for its, for its moment, let's say.
Mm-hmm. And how was it emotionally to go back to that track? And like you were so young. So how was it to go back and like a time machine and say like, oh, I was so young when I done that, and it still feels right?
I mean, Go ahead, John.
I don't know that. I mean, I think it was really fun, emotional. I don't know that it was. I think I was happy to resurrect it, but I don't think there was any like heavy emotion or anything to it, really.
I mean, I like going back. This is kind of overall in Spymob. I love the challenge of going back and trying to do it better. That my personal challenge with it. And then it's such a great, we all love that song. So it was just, for me, it was great to emotionally satisfying to go in there and just really give it my all, at this point. So that's just, for me.
Nice. I notice we are sort of running out of time, so I'll get to the last few bits and pieces. I'll skip a couple of bits that I had. But one thing I kind of wanted to know is, obviously you've done this album sort of independently, just with you guys kind of, funding it and doing most of the work. What are the kind of the pros and the cons of doing it in that way that you're doing it now?
With like the pros and cons of
being sort of
being independent.
Being independent, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everything takes a little money, so if we have to, get strings or, things like that. So that's kind of tricky. I don't know, I think maybe some artists might be like, oh, well, I didn't have a lot of creative freedom with their label situation or whatever. But we were primarily with, a lot of the time, most of the time with Pharrell and Chad. And so I don't know, like we had freedom to do what we want. They were so gracious with us to let us be as creative as we wanted to be. So I don't feel like there's a, like, oh, we have all of our creative freedom now or anything. You definitely feel like, the financials of it is a little more tricky, but I feel really grateful with like the fans we have and the people who are excited to see us come back, and we're able to reach a lot of people with, not without a marketing team. And then, like we were just saying, with the technology and being able to do it and Logic and whatnot, we're able to like make this album for a lot less than it would have cost, us going into a studio.
I need to send this podcast to somebody at Apple at some point as well, because I think you've had a few little sentences there that would go lovely in an Apple keynote at some point.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in part because of Logic, but I think from a production side, I think in terms of our own satisfaction with the result, I think collectively we've had just so many years producing music and creating collections of music that there is no downside at all from a creative production side. I think, if we had $1 billion deal, I would, I mean, we might choose to work with producers for fun, but I think I could also imagine we wouldn't change anything about how we create. I think it's always nice to have a massive promotional force behind you. That it would be great to have that kind of support. But other than that, I don't think I feel any downside to how we're doing it.
It's good. And then I guess to sort of start wrapping it up, what's next for Spymob? Obviously, we've got this album coming over the next sort of few months in this sort of staggered release. But after that, have you guys discussed about future plans or anything?
We're about 2/3 of the way through the production of the next album, and we've got a playlist of songs, and I don't know, we've got a couple dozen songs in production, but probably, a little half of that or a little less will be on the next album. And John continues to write, like the assembly line is happening. So, we're already playing with album titles and sequencing of songs and making decisions, but there's still a meaningful amount of finishing work, but the production of, a dozen or more songs is well underway.
Amazing. Great to hear.
Yes.
Because I know there's a lot of people out there that are looking forward to this album, so they'll be very pleased to hear that there's even more coming after that as well.
Exactly.
Are we going to see any, because I've been asked this, are we going to see any physical copies of anything or any merchandise or anything like that?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of, like, I was kind of surprised at how much physical we get asked for. You know what I mean? Like, is it going to be on CD? Is it going to be on album? And yeah, we've definitely talked about like, how could we print vinyl? And, we're definitely, that's something we want to do. We just kind of got to figure out all the logistics and things like that. But yeah, we would love to do that. That feels like it would be really fun to do. It feels like it's a very great creative extension of the art of the album, just making a nice vinyl with the cover and,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely something I feel we'd love to do, with just kind of figuring out when we do it,
I look forward to putting in my order for a signed copy.
Yeah,
Man,
me too.
I can't wait to make one, man. I can't wait.
And I'll say, if you do sign copies, please put a little bit more effort into your signatures than our friend Pharrell. I'm not impressed with the money that I've paid for some of these signed albums.
I think it's just a little thing, right?
It's literally PW now.
Man.
That's it. Yeah. We were saying on one of the other podcasts with the Voices of Fire album that came out recently. Yeah, he signed 200 of them, and I was like, oh, I'll buy one of those definitely. And it was just literally a PW, and I was like, oh man, you've only got to do 200. Come on. 200 when you sat there writing your name, it's probably 200 quite a lot, but
Yeah.
all right. Well, actually, very quickly, as there is a couple of minutes left, I wanted to ask a couple of very random questions, just because I chucked a load of stuff into AI just to summarize some things for me before we got to doing this. And I got it to try and throw a few prompts and questions out there. And a lot of it, as you can imagine, was absolute crap and a lot of nonsense. But there were a couple of questions that I spotted and I was like, oh, they might be quite interesting to ask. So the first one is, bear with me while I find it in my notes. Okay. This isn't my wording, so bear with me. There's a legendary story about how you were discovered simply via an early demo tape. If you could hand that young version of Spymob a copy of Another Night, what do you think their reaction would be?
I thought about that.
Wait, let me make sure. If you could hand that young version of Spymob when we had the 1997 Spymob?
If you could give your current album to your earlier selves, pick a time period. It doesn't matter which, but as you're kind of breaking through,
I think we would have liked it.
Absolutely, 100%.
Nice.
Yeah, 100%. In fact, I think it's for me. I think John and Eric feel the same, but I feel like it is the most Spymob album. It's
Nice.
it's the most true to us. Not that I love our previous work. I love our previous work. And Townhouse Stereo holds a beautiful place in my heart, but it's just, we've had all these years to realize ourselves and just get to different stages in our lives. And we're also better, and we were able to make the album on our own, sitting around keeping score again, another one that I love the album. But we did have a producer on that album, and it was leaned a little bit more rock. And that's awesome. It's freaking awesome. I love it. Think Another Night definitely feels, John, Eric, you can tell me what you think, but I think it feels the most Spymob of all of our records. That's the way I feel.
Yeah.
And I think listening it, as I listened to it the last sort of, I don't know, when you gave me the link a couple of months ago, whatever it was, I've also been trying to listen to it interspersed with some of the older stuff as well. And like you said, it sounds very Spymob. I listened to the new album first and I was like, that's immediately got the sound of a classic Spymob album, whether it's the music, the writing, the lyrics, not
The
that
melodies.
not that it sounds similar to the other work, but it's got that feel to it where you can immediately go, oh yeah, it's a Spymob album.
Yeah. It sitting around keeping score, just for those power pop fans out there that love that sort of incessant, compressed, loud sound. That's an incredible album, an incredible sounding album, and a legitimate side of who we are. But even at that time, I think within a year of it coming out, I remember us talking about how, wow, that is a sort of balls to the wall of sound, rather incessant. So, even at that time, that was more, a few years after I think the EP that you're talking about, Penny. But even at that time, I think we were aware of okay, we did that. That's a side of us, but it's not necessarily the core of who we are. And maybe we went a little beyond ourselves in terms of the intensity that we hear, because that 6-song EP, that was more than a demo, but it was definitely the first time people like Pharrell heard us. I think that was more reflective of a more dynamic up and down space, more space in the recordings that we naturally heard. So if we're being compared to sitting around keeping score as our baseline, then I think this album, as well as our earlier albums, will be seen as sort of softer.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not, but for us, it feels more sort of true to how we hear things.
Yeah.
Nice.
And with a couple of minutes, one more completely random question. Again, not my wording. Your music has always had a highly cinematic quality to it, which I agree with. Songs like 2040 or German Test Drive feel like they belong in a movie. If Another Night were the soundtrack to a film, what kind of movie would it be? and who would direct it?
Oh,
Damn, the whole album, if it's right.
Yeah, if it was like an original soundtrack, what type of movie would it fit to?
An
John,
adult film? I'm just-
God, I don't know, Steven.
I told you it was a
hard
random
one.
question.
Well, to me, the album, the songs are held together by, there's a lot of loss on the album.
Mhm.
There's a lot of a sense of like, there's hope and striving, but also just that unrequited love message. And, a song like Body Double is a great example of a song that John will write that has this really up feeling, like Stand Up and Win is like, it's happy, but it's really about, trying to support a friend who's depressed, and Body Double is about the experience of trauma and feeling triggered. So to me, it would, I mean, I don't know if The Notebook would be a good ref, but just like, but to me, I mean, there were numerous times where I'd be arranging a song of John's on this album and just weeping and going to where, yeah, these songs to me are very evocative of just feelings of loss and longing and loneliness. And that's why, the cover art, that was great cover art by Julia Vickerman, who's an acquaintance of mine. I actually have that painting on the wall over there. And John said, how about that painting for the cover art? Is just so appropriate because it's this feeling of like, shit.
yeah. And thanks for admitting that you cry a little bit when you were recording, because yesterday I
Yeah.
was listening to the song Make Things Right and I started to cry. Not just because of the lyrics, but the melodies are so beautiful. And I was like,
Raphael,
what is
that is one of
happening?
the songs. That is absolutely one of the songs where I remember where I was. I was driving
I
home
got the
from the
goosebumps and
airport.
everything. Sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you for calling that out, because that song, just working on that arrangement was just catharsis of, like, because we all have experiences where like we've done shitty things that we didn't want to hurt someone, but we do. And then how do we
Yes.
navigate that? Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for this song, by the way. Like, it's amazing.
Yeah.
It's my
Yes,
favorite.
Thank you.
Thank you for saying that.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
On that cheerful note, time to wrap things up, I think.
Can I ask just one question?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Is it right to assume that Pharrell back in the days, like, used to call you Bumblebee?
Bumblebees?
Bumblebees?
Yes.
No, I don't
No.
remember that.
Yeah, because there's a recording session that you guys did on BBC Radio, and you guys are playing the outro of I think Bobby James, like pa pa pa.
Yeah.
And Pharrell is like improvising the lyrics probably. And there's this moment that he's like, and the bumblebees learn how the hum they're going. So I always like in my head, and maybe it's because of the language barrier because I'm Brazilian, I always thought like, is he talking about the band because of the humming and the melodies? I don't know.
No, but he was capable of saying anything in that improvisational setting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
That was one big improvisation.
Yes, it is. It sounds like
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay.
All right. I think that's it. We're out of time. Dead on. So thank you so much, guys. It's been great to like kind of finally get you here all together. I know, John, I've been trying to convince you for ages. So, thank you to you for making the time and joining us. I know
Thanks for
everyone's
coming
really
back.
Yes, to the other guys, obviously, they know that.
Thank you for having us.
But yeah, everyone's really excited about the new music. Great to hear there's even more coming. Where should people follow you guys online if they want to keep up to date with the releases and stuff like that?
Instagram is probably where we're most active. So Instagram would be the best spot. Our Spymob HQ is what it is, at Spymob HQ. We do have
If
our
you're old
website up.
fashioned and you like a website, you can go to spymob.music.
And Brent, you finally performed your admin duties and got rid of that old account, did you?
Yes. Yeah. Did it drop off now? Yeah, I
think
know.
so, yeah.
That's been one of the things about setting this up is like, it's a lot of setup for a new band these days to get all of that kind of sorted. It's a lot, all the different social medias. And so, yeah, I've been chipping away at that, and we're kind of using this front, this earlier stages here to kind of get all of that working right and stuff, which is, yeah.
I can imagine
It's a lot
there's
of
more
work, but
I can imagine there's more, as much that goes into the admin as there is actually making the music these days.
Gosh.
Well, in
Oh my God.
January, we're like, okay, so we're going to release this in May. So we need to stop the fun part. We need to stop the music making part. And so February, March, April, and now, well, yeah, really the last 5 months have been about just, in some ways, a lot of cleanup for things that we hadn't done right over the years, migrating all of our music to a new distributor, just making sure that all of the royalty revenue streams are right, and making sure social media was enough in place. So we've really had to kind of suspend the meat and potatoes of what we do, but we're getting back into it now.
Yeah. Yeah,
Good
just
to
take
hear.
this time to figure out how we do it, get everything set up so posting and things like that are easier, and then we'll continue on that second record, which we're all three we're so excited to get back into.
Great to hear.
Nice.
Lovely stuff. Thank you so
Yeah.
much, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks to everyone for listening. Head over to theothers.net for all the show notes and links and stuff like that. And you can find us online at Otherz Podcast. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.